Good morning, everybody, and welcome to InsureTalk13. My name is Nondoto Mhlungu, and I will be your host for this session. Now, we do realize that this is a busy time of the year for most of you, with 1 July being a big renewal month. So we do appreciate that you have taken the time to join us here today. Do sit back, be comfortable, and enjoy the session. All right, so as always, we've got a jam-packed lineup in store for you. It should be appearing on your screen right now. And today we've decided to give you a different kind of food for thought. I am, of course, referring to our central theme of the day, being the importance of the agricultural sector in food security. So you can look forward to what some of our speakers will be sharing and unpacking a little bit later on in the session. This and a lot more to come, so do not go anywhere. Let me take this opportunity now to thank and acknowledge all of our sponsors, without whom this event would not be possible. A huge thank you to our headline sponsor today, Santam. Huge thank you to you. And our event partners, of course, include CIB, the IISA, who have assisted with the accreditation of this session for 2.5 CPD hours, as well as Cover Magazine coming in as our media partner. Huge thank you to all of our partners. All right, let us not waste any more time and head right on over to the business of the day by introducing our first speaker. He does go by the name of Christo van der Heerden. He is an executive director at Agri SA and is going to be talking to us about the South African agricultural prospects in 2021. Without any further ado, then it is over to you, Christo.
Good morning to you all. I'm greeting you from a beautiful place here along the West Coast, a place called Hazerfontein, and it's quite a privilege to operate here from Hazerfontein amidst the trauma that is caused by this pandemic. And I trust that you are all safe, that you're all healthy, and I trust that you will find my presentation insightful this morning and that it will stimulate debate into the right direction, because as you all know, without food, we will not be able to survive. So let me start right away, and I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation with you. Okay, there it is in slide mode. So I will be talking about commercial farmers, the number of commercial farmers, and then two very important production factors, natural resources such as agricultural land, the state of water, etc. I also talk about the agricultural growth last year, also engaging around the impact of the pandemic, and then obviously agricultural outlook for 2021, then the agricultural challenges, and conclude with a few concluding remarks. Now let me start right away. South Africa and our food security status depend to a large extent on our commercial farmers and what they do in the space. Now, if you look at the figures of Stats SA, which was released last year, it tells us there was approximately 40,122 farmers in South Africa, commercial farmers. They've also gave us an oversight in terms of the top 10 district municipalities by income, and those municipalities contribute approximately 148 billion to total income. If you look on my right-hand side, you'll see the top provinces in terms of agricultural production is one, the Cape Highlands. In the Western Cape, income of approximately 27 billion rand, 8.2% in terms of overall contribution. Then in Mpumalanga, Gertsibandi district municipality, 18 billion, Free State, and then along the West Coast, 13.4 billion. Also in the Northwest, Kenneth Kaunda, 13, and then Eastern Cape, Free State, Mpumalanga, also again Free State, and then Gauteng. Now this is critical to understand what's happening within the space. Yes, I've already told you that approximately 148 billion in terms of these municipalities contribute approximately 148 billion. The top 10 employment districts accounted for 374,000 employees, 46.6% of total employment. And then the largest proportion of these farms was in livestock, also mixed farming and field crops. And the provinces with the highest number of farms in 2017 was Free State, Western Cape, Northwest, Northern Cape. And then the provinces with the lowest numbers of commercial farms were Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo. So this tells you a very, very interesting, or it paints a very interesting picture in terms of where the bulk of our food actually comes from. If you look at how many farmers are registered with SARS per province, you'll see this number has dropped remarkably, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Since 2013, there was approximately 57,357 farmers that were registered with SARS, and that number has dropped over time to almost 40,000. The latest figure that we've received is that number has even dropped further to approximately 35,000. Now, it is not that as if farmers are trying to evade paying taxes by not registering with SARS. There's a lot of consolidation taking place. Your smaller farmers are leaving, they're selling, and then you see also a lot of consolidation taking place in the sector, because that's the nature of this game, and it's not only limited to South Africa, it's a worldwide phenomenon. Now let's look at the state of our agricultural land. This is also very, very significant. Now, according to the terrestrial ecosystem account, South Africa's mainland is nearly 122 million hectares. Now, this is very interesting. We have seen net decreases in commercial crops and secondary timber plantations, which together decreased by over 440,000 hectares. Should we be worried? I'll come to that later on. Urban and mining land cover increased by approximately 154,000 and 43,000 hectares respectively. In other words, we'll see a trend that is also not limited to South Africa, all over Africa, all over the world. People are leaving rural areas, they're moving to towns. Just here in Cape Town, you'll see as people migrate from rural areas to towns, more and more valuable agricultural land is now then utilized for housing purposes. And then also mining is also taking over farming land for mining purposes. Urban townships, and that's very, very significantly. Urban townships at this point in time shows the largest increase at approximately 70,000 hectares. This is linked to a growing and urbanizing population, people moving to cities and areas of economic growth. Now, just to break this down further for you, you'll see whilst there was a net decrease of 9.2% in terms of cultivated commercial fields, we've seen massive increase in commercial agricultural land under pivot. Now, if you look at what the National Development Plan has stated some time ago, that land and more land must be allocated for pivot purposes, we've seen this now automatically happening. And the reason for that is South Africa remains a very arid country. Also, our river systems, to a large extent, depends on the weather. Climate change has an impact on all of this, and there's a massive increase in terms of pivot irrigation. Orchards expanded by nearly 18%, vines expanded by nearly 17%. And then significantly, orchards largely replaced natural or semi-natural areas of cultivated commercial crops, but it also replaced timber plantation and vines. And you see that in the massive growth in exports in terms of especially the citrus industry and the macadamia nut industry. Now, if you look at this map, this is very, very important to note. We will see where the sort of change in population is happening in these areas, in the Eastern Cape, areas in KZN, also areas in the Free State, and people in these brown areas. There's Northwest, there's KZN, also parts of the Northern Cape. Most of these people move towards your urban areas. There, people move to Gauteng and also the mining areas. That's very, very interesting to see that happening, and areas where there's large-scale commercial agriculture. And then you also see people moving into the western parts of the country, where there's also tremendous growth in terms of agriculture and other activities. And obviously, one needs to ask to what extent does government makes provision for that? Because you cannot stop migration. You must anticipate migration, and you must invest in infrastructure. Otherwise, people are going to grab the nearest piece of land, put up a shack because they want to be closest to an area where they can find a job, where they can find an income, and so forth. So Eastern Cape contains more than a third of the country's subsistence crop land cover, and this is very interesting, that people from these subsistence crop areas rather prefer to move to areas where they can find a job. And that's quite a lot of food for thought. In other words, we will have to find ways and means to translate subsistence farming into commercial farming, because that's where the future lies, that's where the job lies, that's where the wealth creation lies. I'm not going to go into all of this, but you'll see Northwest experienced the largest decrease in commercial cropland cover relative to other provinces. Now, we've seen in Northwest a range of factors driving this, but I think to a large extent, the mining industry is also playing a big role in terms of this decrease. And in Western Cape contains half of the country's orchards and wines. And this is the place where you come and drink wine, and where you come and enjoy some slook, and where you just enjoy life. Let me go to our state of water resources. Now, if you look at this little map here on my right-hand side, these are all our catchment areas. Here in the Western Cape, you've got most of your catchment areas towards the southern part of the Western Cape. And these are also areas where high-level commercial agriculture takes place. If you look at this part of the country, this is part of the Eastern Cape, Lesotho, also part of the Free State, huge part of KZN, huge part of Mpumalanga, and right up here into Limpopo, especially the eastern parts. These catchment areas, these rivers, also is indicative of the higher rainfall that these areas receive. But these are also areas where there's a large portion of subsistence farming happening. Now, sometimes I wonder whether subsistence farmers realize that they actually sit on gold. They sit on land with high rainfall, they sit on land that's close to rivers, etc. And the potential for commercial farming is massive. And that is something that I would like our government to start to address, because it's not necessary for people to find or to try to find their fortunes in other areas. If one can get the commercial agricultural economy going in these areas, it will make a massive contribution towards people's wealth and people's futures. But what is happening in the Western Cape? The Western Cape will become drier over the next 100 years. We know that in the Little Karoo, I've just released a video in terms of the drought situation. Farmers in the Karoo area, Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, they are really battling. So if you have a few extra cents there, please channel it towards Agri-SA's Drought Fund, because we assist farmers, farm workers in those areas with this. So precision farming is becoming increasingly important. Farmers must become water stewards. We must also ensure that the water resources are managed properly. And then, to what extent can we take our coastal cities out of the current water system and make them more reliant on water that we extract from the sea? Because our cities take a large percentage of water out of the system. And remember, people argue that agriculture are big water users. Yes, that's right. But we only get the water that is left after it was allocated to industries, to communities, to people out there, to the cities and to the towns. So yes, we're happy for the leftovers that we get, but there's a massive responsibility on us to make sure that we do it, or we manage it effectively and efficiently. Agricultural growth, yes, we had a very, very good year. You just look at this map. you will see all of our industries, mining, manufacturing, construction, all of them experience a massive dip, but tremendous growth in the agriculture sector, because from our side as organized agriculture, we assisted the minister at that time to declare agriculture as an essential service. We continually engage with cabinet, with minister. I'm engaging with the president. I'm engaging with Minister Pravin Gordhan last Friday and Minister Toko about harbors. How do we improve the efficiencies of the harbors and so forth? Because here we sit on a gold mine, but we cannot allow harbors or dilapidated roads, small harbors that are not operating efficiently to impact negatively on the system. But we also know, and this is important, the impact of the pandemic also did not leave agriculture unscathed. The loss of demand for products from the agriculture sector amounts to 13.5 billion rand, and that was only for last year. And the reason for that is restaurants were closed, game farming had a massive challenge in terms of getting hunters from overseas to come and hunt. Agri-tourism suffered, the hospitality industry suffered, and they all rely or they all get food products from the agriculture system. Impact of the pandemic in terms of agriculture or in terms of unemployment, that remains a massive challenge for South Africa. The unemployment rate sits approximately, I think now at 33%. We've also seen quite a lot of people unemployed in terms of the expanded definition, 43%. And then a big worry for us is the number of youth that cannot find employment. And somehow we will have to come up with a plan as the economic sectors in this country to see how do we create opportunities for young people. Just in terms of October, December 2019, we had approximately 885,000 workers in the industry. That number has dropped due to the fact that the wine industry, the wool industry, the cotton industry all had a bit of a setback, and especially the wine sector, and lots of workers are employed from time to time in the wine sector, and they couldn't be employed due to lockdown regulations. Overall outlook for 2021, as you can see on this map, our exports is growing tremendously. That's why we need to take care of our harbors, our roads, our rail infrastructure. We are in constant interaction with Transnet, and it's a very positive interaction. We've seen the president announce a very important step to take our infrastructure to the next level by announcing that an independent regulator will be appointed for rail and harbors and things like that. We've seen also he has made an announcement in terms of expanding the amount of electricity that can be generated by independent power producers. So these are all things that will take our economy forward. So as you can see over here, very favorable weather conditions. Our supplies of grain, oilseeds, and horticultural crops will be adequate for the year ahead. There's surplus production in terms of agricultural commodities. We've seen a rise in food inflation, but that is a spillover effect of what we have seen last year. Many farmers have also cut back due to the fact that our hospitality sector will close down. But I think as the economy is opening up, we will be able to lower the inflation rate over time. Then something that is very positive for the industry. We've seen tractor sales also increase. We've seen 540 units sold during April this year, as opposed to the 440 units sold in April last year. Now, very interesting, during the lockdown, John Deere phoned me and said, listen, we cannot have our combine harvesters dropped off in Durban Harbour. Durban Harbour is closed. We made contact with Transnet, and that ship was already on its way to Singapore. And they made a phone call, and the ship turned around and dropped it off. And then the next problem was they had to then move these combine harvesters from the harbor into other provinces, and the licensing office that must issue these permits were closed. Then we had to phone them again, open up that permit office so that we can use the low beds to transport these things to the other provinces. But that's the kind of interaction between government, between the private sector, between an organization such as Agri-SA. And that's the role that we fulfill in the background, just to keep the wheels going in terms of food production in South Africa. Maize, commercial maize for 2019-2020 increased by 36% year on year to 15.3 million tons. Now, I can recall during the drought in 2015-2016, this figure dropped to almost 7 million tons. And luckily for us, we're part of a global village. We could import a lot of maize at that stage. And farmers also had surplus stock from the previous years. But maize forms the backbone of the entire agricultural system, because you use maize not only to make porridge or to bake bread and all of these things, but you use maize for animal feed as well. And we have to produce enough maize to make sure that all of the various needs of not only people, but of the industry is also being addressed. And then we've seen massive exports of maize to China. We've also seen exports to neighboring countries, notably Zimbabwe and Mozambique. But Zimbabwe also had a good season, so they placed a ban out on imports from South Africa. I just hope and trust that there will be enough maize for the people of our neighboring countries as well. And then we've seen prices reach record levels of 10,000 Rand per ton for soya beans and just over 9,000 Rand per ton for sunflowers. And really, this is a thing that I really want to emphasize. I think it's our farmers need this at this point in time. Farming is a high-risk business. 1 year you have a drop in commodity prices. The next year you've got some kind of biosecurity impacting on your crops, like we've had the locust plague, we've seen foot and mouth disease, we've seen avian flu. All of these pests impact negatively on your yields. So in Afrikaans we say, as dit pap reën, dan moet ons skep. So ek gun dit vir die boere, and I know that the farmers really benefit from this. And it's not only big scale farmers, but also our subsistence farmers, our small scale farmers. They need this booster, because we don't know what the weather will do, or what the pest will do next year, or what commodity prices will do next year. And it's important that they derive enough income from their produce just to settle their debt. South Africa currently produces food on debt. In other words, we owe our banks and all of our other financial institutions in the region of 200 billion Rand. 200 billion Rand. So don't think that that farmer has a good life when he drives a big Toyota or a big car, because obviously they buy these things just for tax purposes, but they are heavily indebted. Livestock, we've seen it remains quite resilient. Also, meat products destined for the local market, we've seen relatively high levels and price levels for that. The demand for meat in the local market also remained relatively strong. We have also seen farmers are busy rebuilding their herds. So it is not that there is a shortage of meat on the market. It is just that the supply, the levels of supply is low at this point in time due to the fact that people are rebuilding their herds. But as you can see there, livestock also follow the good rainfalls. If there's good rains, you'll see also improvement in livestock and numbers. And then farmers with intensive livestock feeding systems, feedlot, poultry operations, piggeries, experience some margin squeeze, mainly because of maize prices. And I've alluded to this earlier. Grain, maize, and soya makes up around 70% of livestock feed. and hopefully, we will be able to manage that. Citrus, this is a massive success story. The minister has signed export agreements with China, with other Asian countries, and we've seen a massive growth in citrus to the rest of the world, and we're really very happy for the citrus industry for the successes that they are achieving. The citrus fruit, you see there, the avocado industry has expanded from about 13,000 hectares in 2010 to almost 19,000 hectares to date, and that for us is significant. Apple and pear exports grew by 41%, right? We've also seen peach and nectarine exports. The number of export cartons was 50% more in 2019 than in 2020, and that was driven by the demands of nectarines. And then we've seen the total value of more than 60 billion projected for 2019. Foreign exchange revenue is expected to contribute 70% of the combined overall earnings in the citrus, table grape, palm, and stone fruit industries. Fiber is also doing well. Cotton prices are on the increase. Wool prices also on the increase, and farmers are doing good in this space. What are the challenges? I think one of the bigger challenges is obviously the rise in fertilizer, herbicide, and diesel prices. These things are a major concern for us. We've also seen major bottlenecks in harbors, and people struggle to get the raw materials in to translate this raw materials into fertilizers, and hopefully these things will normalize as we go forward. But it's the poor farmer that takes the hiding when it comes to these price increases, because the farmer is a price taker. The farmer has very little control in terms of the price that he will be able to sell his products at when it goes to the market. And our big retailers, our markets, our exporters, importers, they determine the price. And the poor farmer sometimes have to just struggle to make a bit of profit. And as these prices increase, it really puts our farmers under tremendous pressure. So, when you enjoy that lovely agricultural product tonight, think of the farmer that's also lying awake tonight and worry about how are they going to ensure the long-term profitability of the industries. And the other issue is crime. We've seen crime is spiking, especially during this time of people, more people getting unemployed. And as I've said earlier, farmer is taking the risk, but the farmer have to lie awake at night, not just worrying about, how are they going to maintain profitability, but how are they going to stay alive on their farms? And this is reality. Criminals are coming after farmers, regardless of whether they're pink, blue, yellow, white, or black. And I think this is something as an industry, we must take hands and say, enough is enough. We need to protect our farmers, because not everyone is a farmer. They can give me a large farm today. If I don't know what to do on that farm, it will become just a wasteland. And at the end of the day, it will threaten our food security over the long term. Climate change. This map was presented many moons ago. If you look, this is the Western Cape at this point in time, but see what's happening. Our climate change will impact on us by 2050. So we need to look at stopping unsustainable agricultural practices, the overuse of natural resources. We have to look at different methods to ensure food security on the one hand, but also on the other hand, how do we take care of our environment? Because we cannot leave a wasteland for the next generation. It's not only unethical, but I mean, how do you want to leave a wasteland for your children's children and for their children? They will blame us for leaving a legacy that is just a wasteland. Then affordable finance, land bank is in serious trouble. The AOC commercial banks at this point in time provide about 60% of all commercial loans. Land bank about 29%, and other institutions. For us, a big worry remains finance. We have a new plan on the table. They call it the blended financing model, and that's mostly directed at your small emerging farmers. But my big worry is obviously commercial farmers. To what extent will they be able to access loans for the next season? And as a responsible sector or mouthpiece for the sector, we engage then with all of these banks to make sure that our farmers are not left in the dark in terms of accessing production loans for the next season. Policy uncertainty, playing games with our constitution is a big no-no. Farmers do not take their money and they do not have the ability to invest in another country. Yes, some of them have the ability. They have now farms in Zambia and other parts of Africa and so forth. But farmers, the only resource that they have is the land that they own. Our point of view is, yes, we must have land reform. We need to address the legacies of the past, but you can only address it if you expand ownership to all of our people. We must make sure that every person in South Africa that owns a property, people that live on communal land, on state land, on church land, that they get title deed over their land. If I take my own situation, I started off as a teacher 30 years ago. I got a loan from the bank. I purchased my house. My house at that time cost me 60,000 Rand. I lived in KZN. And when my kids was ready for university, I went to the bank and asked them, if they can assist me. And they looked at my house. They said, Mr. van der Rede, your house, the value of your house has now increased from 60,000 to 600,000 Rand. And I could take out a loan. I can send my kids to university. And voila, me and my wife could afford a little holiday, in the Cape waterfront. And that's how these things work. Countries that honor property rights, countries that protect property rights, countries that expand property rights, grow the wealth of those countries. Countries that fiddle around with expropriation without compensation, with placing land under custodianship, or even nationalizing that land, those countries remain terribly poor, and they just put the entire population at risk when it comes to wealth creation. So, last but not least, thank you for this opportunity to engage with you this morning. I'm a frank talker, and you have all the right to criticize me and take me on, but that's my job to put these facts on the table. And for me, it's about continuously empowering our farmers and protecting and advancing their interests. That's critical to ensure future food security for all South Africans. Last but not least, it is not land that produces food, it's expertise. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Christy, for that very insightful talk. Our next speaker now is Nick Hudson. Nick is the CEO of Asana Partners, as well as the founder of Panda. He is no stranger to the insurance industry and has been featured on numerous media platforms. Nick is going to be talking to us about COVID and the clash of ideologies. This should be a good one. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I was introduced yesterday as South Africa's favorite granny killer. So this is a big improvement. Thank you very much. Of course, I'm not a granny killer. Panda, to those of you who are not familiar with the organization, is now a quite large international organization. And we're not just scientists. Scientists represent about half the membership. There's a big team of people working behind the scenes on all of the production stuff that we do, the articles and so on. And of course, when you cover 30 countries around the world, the operations and administration portion is very important. This is a shortened version of a presentation we did last night as an acceptance speech after the award of the Free Market Foundation's annual award to Panda as an organization. That was a real deep dive, and I'm just going to try and do a quick summary version and leave enough time to deal with some questions. The title of the presentation is COVID and the Clash of Ideologies. Our first significant presentation in terms of getting something that went really viral was a presentation called Time to Reopen Society, which was also super titled The Ugly Truth About the COVID-19 Lockdowns. that was presented at BizNews's annual semi-annual investor conference, and it went explosively on YouTube. Within a few days, it achieved 500,000 views. It was still accelerating, attracting 12,000 views an hour, which is quite a lot for a 25-minute presentation, at which point YouTube decided to remove it from its platform, providing no specific reasons other than broad violation of its community guidelines. 1 million views later, and that presentation has not received any criticism of its factual contents. The ratio of likes to dislikes was 100 to 1 before it got pulled off YouTube. It's available on many platforms. I am assuming that everybody here has listened to it. If you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. I'm going to give a brief summary of what that presentation was about, but it really does need a listen. We said that there's a narrative about coronavirus, and when you look at the data carefully, that narrative is false in all of its elements. The narrative says that there's a deadly new virus sweeping around the planet that is spread by droplets and fomites being surface contact transmission, that nobody is immune and there's no treatment for it, that asymptomatic people are major drivers of disease, that PCR tests diagnose COVID, and because of all of this, we have to lock down and wear masks until everyone's vaccinated. Even then, these variants are going to haunt us forever, and we're going to need booster shots. And we have to worry about things like long COVID and reinfections. And anybody who challenges any of these things is a danger to society. And what we pointed out, oh dear, my slides are not advancing. 1 second. There we go. What we pointed out is that all of this is untrue. There's a virus, and it presents high risk to a few people and negligible to most people, negligible risk to most people. And it's only hit some regions of the world. It's airborne mainly, spreading by virtue of minute particles. A minority of people are susceptible to severe disease, and there are several available treatments that are very effective. Asymptomatic people are not the major drivers of the disease spread. Lockdowns and mask mandates, which have never been recommended before, in fact, which were ruled out by every single country's pandemic respiratory virus guidelines, were tried, and they have not worked. Statistically, they have shown absolutely zero benefit. That's true for both lockdowns and mask mandates, and I'm talking about some seriously robust data that has been peer-reviewed, and we are in a domain of being able to say with quite a high degree of certainty that neither lockdowns and masks worked. Variants are not of concern. They do not evade natural immunity, and they do not show signs of evading vaccine-induced immunity. And to the extent that any of them cause increased transmissibility or virulence, we are not seeing evidence for that in the data. PCR tests do not diagnose COVID. Immunity is broad, robust, and long-lasting. I'm talking there about natural immunity from prior infection. And what all the measures have done is to hurt the vulnerable people instead of to help them. Now, if any of that is difficult for you to accept, you must go and listen to the presentation, because we unpack all of this over 25 minutes using, for the most part, evidence provided in the very words of the World Health Organization and the US CDC. What has happened here is that a narrative of intense fear has been broadcast around the planet, and the population that has received that narrative has been pushed so far that they're in a position of being faced with a choice between flight or fight. And it's been ramped up so much that most populations have chosen flight. This presentation is about the how and the why of this fear narrative. A lot of people refer to people like me and the members of Panda as conspiracy theorists. You hear this all the time. But it's quite strange, because almost every presentation that I've done, I've emphasized that we do not really think that this is a product of some giant conspiracy, rather that we see it as an ideological battleground. And we locate and in the work of the famous economist Thomas Sowell, the nature of this ideological split. And I thoroughly recommend his fairly short book, A Conflict of Visions. It's a classic and one that every educated person should consider. Of course, when it comes to conspiracy theories, the really amusing story that broke over the last month was Fauci-gate, the release of these spectacular emails. And what was astonishing about them, really astonishing, was that we had clear evidence that Fauci had been informed by his scientists that there were lots of signs that this virus had a lab origin. You can see Fauci in these emails hastily convening a teleconference with the scientists. And then a strange thing happened. 3 days later, one of those scientists was out on social media telling the world that the virus was of zoonotic origin, which is to say it didn't come from a lab. Of course, when these emails were released, that was no longer a tenable position. And that very scientist went and deleted his prior tweets. When he was challenged with screenshots of those tweets, he said that Twitter had deleted the tweets and not him. When he was challenged on that, he simply suspended his Twitter account. The guy knew he was guilty. And the reason this is all important is people like Panda and many others had been pointing to the very obvious signs of lab origin for more than a year and were responded to as conspiracy theorists. So I would actually urge people, when you hear that word being used, it's usually applied to people who are not talking about a conspiracy at all. You know, saying that there's a lab origin is not to assert a conspiracy. Lab research is done all the time. And gain of function research in viruses is done all the time. For a virus to leak from a lab doesn't require a conspiracy. And it doesn't mean that you believe in a conspiracy if you're pointing to the signs that that was indeed the case. So when you hear this word being used, it's actually a signal that you should listen to people. Another place where we were called conspiracy theorists that has now turned out to be fact is in the dimension of this transmission story. How is this virus transmitted? When Panda did its work on its early work, we're talking in May last year, on mortality from coronavirus, the inspiration for the work was the simple observation that different parts of the world had vastly different mortality rates. There were some countries that had virtually no mortality, or even in some places zero mortality, and others like Belgium and Spain and Italy and the US had quite high mortality. Nothing massive, but certainly enough to qualify as an epidemic. You know, the reality was that for most of the world's population, there was no epidemic. And we found this very strange, and we wanted to try and investigate what might be driving this. So we built an enormous generalized linear model, and we threw the kitchen sink at this thing, trying to look for what are the factors that were driving the vast differences between countries. And we came up with some pretty expected answers. The older your population is, the more severely you're going to get impacted. The fatter your population is, the higher the obesity prevalence rate is, the more you will be affected. And the higher the prevalence rate of the comorbidities that are classically associated with coronavirus patients, the higher your prevalence rate will be. But then a surprising result came out, and that was that neither lockdown stringency nor mobility were affecting mortality. And we were astonished. We thought that we had assumed up till then that lockdowns would have some or other beneficial effect on mortality, but the model was telling us that they didn't. Since then, as many as 50 papers it's actually more than 50 papers now, a new one was published yesterday, have been published showing this exact same result. We believe we were the first ones to observe it, publishing our result in June of last year. And we then began thinking, why would this be the case, this surprising result? And we proposed that it might be because this respiratory virus actually transmitted like other respiratory viruses, which is to say by means of minute airborne aerosols. and not as the world had been told by droplets and fomites, which had inspired things like mask wearing and social distancing and the 6 feet rule and all the perspex and all the wrapping and all the sanitizing that has been going on. Now, a strange thing happened. For a year of being called conspiracy theorists for challenging the World Health Organization and CDC's perspective on this, once again, I'll point out to you that, challenging the mechanism of transmission is not a conspiracy, not to assert a conspiracy. Quietly, a couple of weeks ago, the World Health Organization and the CDC inserted these paragraphs on their websites without any press releases or articles in the press. And, it was quite astonishing, because what we had said was that the image on the right represented how coronavirus was spreading, and not the images on the left, the fomite and droplets. And the World Health Organization began endorsing the measures that we had proposed. We had said that all of the other things that are being done are not making a difference in the data, and the reason is this thing is being spread in an airborne fashion. All of those things are not expected to make a difference. Ventilation of indoor spaces will make a difference. Outdoor spaces do not matter at all. The coronavirus does not transmit outdoors. So there is a triple layer of absurdity hanging over anybody who wears a mask outdoors, or any government that imposes mask wearing outdoors. Why a triple layer? First of all, mass mask mandates don't make sense, because asymptomatic transmission is not a driver of the epidemic. Secondly, outdoor transmission is not a thing. And thirdly, masks don't work. Masks do not stop aerosols. Masks actually generate aerosols. So let's get back to this narrative of fear. Why are we dealing with this strange world where, according to us, fear has been deliberately promoted and caused people to literally lose their cognitive ability? Well, we say this firstly because the elements of this fear are continually projected, very similar to the list I showed you earlier. And what's been focused on is all these highly salient ways of trying to address the story. And what that salience does is it keeps the deadly virus front of mind for people. All the temperature checking and stickers and glass separators and masks on every face, the curfews, the changes to our normal patterns of life, testing, sanitizing, fumigation, all these things are salient. They're designed to maintain awareness of the virus. And then there's advertising, which our behavioral scientists in Panda and psychological people can diagnose for us and show, look, this has been designed by a behavioral scientist to maximize fear. There are lots of jokes told about this. Here we go. Look at this one. Why isn't COVID affecting you people? Well, we don't have TV. There's a lot of truth in this. We see adverts which are deliberately targeting people who are not at risk and trying to make them scared. Here we have young people being threatened with the asymptomatic transmission as a driver story, told to stay at home, told to disrupt their lives. And then this particularly chilling one, I can't stand this one. I think it's completely sick. Look at the detail in this image. On the teeth of this person, what are they? Braces. This is targeting young people with the messaging that useless little bit of cloth, which does nothing and shows no efficacy in the data, removing that mask is tantamount to shooting somebody, to murdering them. That's sick. That's manipulative in the extreme. Now, this assertion of ours that people were being deliberately frightened by governments was also called a conspiracy theory. But then what started happening is documents started leaking out of governments. First of all, in Germany, Welt, a large mainstream publication, blew open what was called the Panic Papers scandal, where you see the people in this government think tank communicating with each other, saying, let's talk by private email because we don't want this stuff to get out in the public domain. And what you see them discussing is how to overstate the threat and how to get people to take extreme measures against a threat which they very well knew what they were overestimating. And so it went. When months later, one of the members of the British government's SAGE SPY B team, the B there stands for behavioral science, came out and said that he said, clearly, using fear as a means of control is not ethical. Using fear smacks of totalitarianism. It's not an ethical stance for any modern government. I'm an optimistic person, but this has given me a more pessimistic view on people. And in Canada, the nudge unit says these very creepy things. A massive social science experiment has taken place over the planet, and it's given government important clues on how to modify citizens' behavior for other big global issues, such as climate change. In Ireland, quite creepy. Here you have these guys saying that their members are instructed to review and internalize instructions to look for ways to increase insecurity, anxiety, uncertainty. They instructed them to go after people and not institutions, because people hurt faster than institutions. It is very sinister stuff. So once again, our conspiracy theory turned out to be fact. Now, what happens if you bombard populations with a constant message of fear is you generate a boiling frog effect. And you have the ability then to slowly move the goalposts. So what starts off as a message of protecting healthcare workers and then flattening the curve for a couple of weeks very rapidly becomes lockdown until the vulnerable have been vaccinated, and then until everybody over 50 has been vaccinated, and then until the children have been vaccinated. So you have the boiling frog syndrome and moving goalposts. And what this achieves is the ability to manipulate good, willing people to making unusual sacrifices, sacrificing their freedom, resigning to isolation, accepting loss of jobs and businesses that they've built up over years, and all sorts of infringements on their bodily autonomy. And it also creates an environment where you can do the one thing that is most corrosive of societal courage, which is to pit people one against the other, to polarize, to divide and conquer. Dividing society into two groups, those who are imposing harm and those who are opposing it, your lockdown promoters and your lockdown skeptics, the COVID heroes and the COVIDiots, like me. And the frightening thing about this is this was all attempted once before in 2009, at least once before. 2009, at the time of the swine flu epidemic, H1N1 is the virus concerned there. If you want to have a very interesting read, I recommend going to this long form article in Spiegel, a German publication. It's available in English on their website. And this documents how the World Health Organization, working with vaccine manufacturers, tried to launch a panic around the swine flu in 2009 until a very famous doctor, Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg, bust the scandal. Now, the important thing there is that this time around, they went for Dr. Wodarg first, altering his Wikipedia webpage to suggest that he was some kind of nut job. Now we get onto the question of how this is all done. The first thing to understand is that media all over the world is controlled by a handful of organizations, in turn controlled by a handful of families. I want to show to you quickly how rapidly a single message, in this case, the message of warning the world about people like me, can be propagated.
Plaguing our country. The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first. The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some representatives use their platforms for their own personal bias and agenda control. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. 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 This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So there you see it. One little message created in an office at the top of the world somewhere, propagated all around the world into the living rooms of people who think that they are listening to news that has been thought through by the presenters, but clearly these presenters haven't applied a moment of thought to what they're saying. They're simply repeating whatever appears on their auto cues, and that message goes around the world. Sorry, there we go. And in addition to controlling the content, those same individuals control the next layer, which is this group called fact checkers. Fact checkers are controlled by exactly the same people, the Soroses and the Gates and the Thompson families and so on, control these fact-checking organizations. I've chosen a piece of fact-checking related to the Lab Origin story as an example, because this is how these guys operate. At the time when one of our colleagues was talking about Lab Origin in August last year, USA Today came out with this fact-checking piece where they said, you know, it's not man-made or engineered, its origin remains unclear. There's scientific consensus that it's not man-made. We strongly condemn conspiracy theories that it has a lab origin. And look at all the scientists who we've got to say all these things. So of course, this piece of fact-checking now is known to be completely false. But the point is that it dominates the narrative. What happens is all the other journalists then go and consult this fact-checking and write their reports based on what the fact-checker says. And there's yet another layer. This very creepy organization, the Coalition for Content, Provenance, and Authenticity, has been set up by Microsoft to include all of the social media and large networks. And you know straight away, as soon as you've heard the title of the organization, that is not what it claims to be. This is not about simply proving authenticity. And in fact, if you read on their website, they're actually going after silencing of what they call disinformation. So they not only decide what you get to hear, they also decide whether or not to report the things that other people, minorities and so on, say as true or false. And they get to decide now whether any dissident voices are heard at all. So we've got this incredible stranglehold over media. Similarly, there's a stranglehold over public health institutions. Here's the South African scene when it comes to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's donations to public health institutions and universities. They saturate the lot. There isn't a single institution of public health in South Africa that is not beholden to the Gates Foundation. Scientists working for these organizations are unable to say anything that disagrees with the Gates Foundation. If they do, they lose their livelihoods and their careers. That's as simple as that. How far does this go? I and one of my colleagues, Peter Castleton, another actuary, were attacked with charges of professional misconduct and unprofessional conduct, complaints laid against the Actuarial Society of South Africa, very serious charges. Now, it turned out that the actuarial consulting firm CEO, who was laying those charges, had received $1.5 million of funding from the Gates Foundation. Now, you should stop and ask yourself, what on earth, why on earth would the Gates Foundation have an interest in funding just one little actuarial consulting firm out there? And is it a coincidence that that firm is the one that came after us? By the way, that process was terminated with all the charges being withdrawn. They were waterless. So why is this happening? And this is where the clash of ideologies comes in. Now I must finish up. Throughout history, there's been people with different ideologies. These very globalist organizations, the World Economic Forum and such as organizations such as the Atlantic Council and Common Purpose and the World Health Organization, are established by and populated by people who believe in centralism. They believe that the world is a better place if it is run by the clever guys at the top. And you see them on their websites. If you go and look at the WEF website, you see what it consists of is a list of what are basically non-problems. These are not material problems for the world, to which they propose only centralist solutions. And you see them sending out very creepy messaging like, Klaus Schwab, you will own nothing and you'll be happy by 2030. There's nothing like a meal of home-cooked worms. This is all real stuff. This is the vision they have for the future of the world under technocratic totalitarianism. In this way, they're no different from any of the other guys, like Stalin, for example. He had very similar ideas. The countries would be best run by technocrats, people who sit there allocating resources and deciding who produces what and who consumes what. Anybody who studied history sees the danger in this immediately. There's been only one short period in history, really, when decentralization was the rule. And during that period of time, poverty has absolutely reduced in a very consistent fashion all over the world. And you've had increasing lifespans and greatly increasing wealth. And although this is plain to see, and also the association with democracy and decentralized is also very easy to see, from every generation has its people who refuse to believe this, who see that the world would somehow be better off under a centralized regime. So it's a clash of ideologies. The ideology of centralism, represented by Stalin, and the ideology of decentralization, as represented by the famous philosopher economist Karl Popper. I think, guys, I'm running into my time limit, and I don't want to be rude and overstay. But if you are enjoying what you are hearing here and would like to hear more, I would refer you to the presentation for the Free Market Foundation last night. It's about 3 times the length of this one and goes into this in quite a bit more depth, covering a lot more material. But I do want to finish off by saying that we all need to stop and think very hard about where this is all heading. The move towards this need to put a needle in every arm, even the arms of people who are fundamentally not at risk to this disease, is very creepy. We head towards a surveillance state type of setup at a pace that I find completely frightening. And I think it's very important to wake people up to this emergent reality. We have really to all stop now and say no. Stop the masks, the isolation, the social distancing, the mass testing, the travel bans, the unnecessary vaccination, especially of children, which is a form of child abuse, given that they face no risk from this disease, the censorship, all of the conflicts of interest that these scientists face, this worship of the white-suited expert God. It's time to just say no and reclaim our lives. And an organization like Panda needs your support. We need our voice amplified, and we need money to fight this machine. We are a non-profit organization with strict internal governance and control mechanisms. Nobody's taking money from this business, this organization, and we need your support. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I hope that you will listen to the 2 presentations I mentioned and visit our website.
Thank you, Nick, for that insightful presentation. A different perspective indeed. Lots of engagement happening in the chat function. Just a reminder that Nick was brought to us by CIB, one of our event partners today. So thank you so much, Nick. All right, over to our next segment. Now we're going to play a short video by the IISA. And on that note, it was Thokozile Mahlangu's birthday just yesterday. She is, of course, the current CEO of the IISA. So happy belated to you. Happy belated birthday, sorry, to you, Thokozile. And on that note, let us see what the IISA has for us.
The top 5 rated member benefits are keeping up to date with industry information and skills development, access to insurance best practice guidelines, access to educational and training resources, the latest news relevant to the profession, and the ability to manage CPD compliance. New value-added benefits include discounted car hire rates at Avid's budget, free CPD content, discounted accommodation at selected Sun International hotels, and discounted tuition at the Graduate Institute of Financial Sciences.
Thank you to the IISA. Over to our next speaker now. We've got Simi Machili. She is the Sales and Marketing Manager at TIC, the Travel Specialist Division of Santam. She's going to be talking to us today about travel today and tomorrow. We all, of course, know that the pandemic has had an adverse effect on the travel and tourism industry. So it will be interesting to see what the developments are going to be in the months to come. So without any further ado, it is over to you, Simi.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning to all our industry partners joining us this morning. I'm going to talk to you today. I just want to put my presentation up about the impact of. Sorry, just a moment. There, I've got it right. About the impact of lockdown and border closures for the international travel industry, and how it impacted travel and the travel insurance industry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to early 2019, and I'm going to take us on a journey through what happened and where we are right now, and what is predicted based on where we find ourselves now, because it's ever changing. Before I jump in, I wanted to share with you a few industry bodies that you may not be familiar with. And I mentioned almost all of them in my presentation as I go along. We've got IATA. These guys formulate industry policy for air travel. They are basically the boss of the industry, and kind of like we understand the FSCA in our industry, they issue policy and regulate it. So if you're booking a ticket through a travel agent, the travel agent needs to be licensed, have an IATA license, and they are probably paying an annual guarantee to keep the license going so no one runs away with our money. And then we've got the United Nations World Tourism Organization, which is self-explanatory. We've got an international travel industry body, World Travel and Tourism Council, and that's made up of members from around the world. And then we've got our own local industry body, ISATA, in South Africa. So TIC, for example, is registered with ISATA. Any reputable travel supplier in the industry would be registered with ISATA. And then superheroes during lockdown was the South African International Relations and Cooperation Department, which we refer to as DIRCO. So I've been doing travel insurance for 33 years. So when I was counting the other day, I realized that it's actually a third of a century that I've had front row seats to all the exciting global events that have happened that have impacted on travel. And I wanted to share with you today some of them. The first image that came up is the tsunami in 2004, devastating the Southeast Asia coast. 230,000 people died. It was the day after Christmas. It was very, very sad. And it destroyed all the tourist facilities. The interesting thing is that Thailand always seems to bounce back. Very, very popular for South Africans to visit. We love going there. And they've also suffered some political conflict along the years that has impacted on travel. And then I've got some images. Well, on the top left-hand corner, I've got, that's an image from the train bombing in Madrid in 2004.
Sorry, Simi?
Yes.
Simi, can you
Hello?
please just go to presenter view and start advancing your slides?
How do I do that?
Are you coming right?
No.
Go down
Sorry
to
about
the bottom right and start presentation mode.
Sorry, guys. We're very technical here. How do I do that?
Click slideshow at the top.
How about that? You do new sheet.
Slideshow at the top, Simi, do you see it?
Where?
At the top.
ribbon.
Top ribbon. The red
Yeah.
ribbon at the top. Yes.
Yes.
Slideshow.
Yes. Sorry, everyone. I'm just going to start again.
No problem.
Does that mean, can everyone see this now?
Yes, we can see it, but it's not in presentation mode.
Click there where she's now.
So where you are, just click there at the bottom,
There.
next to the volume. Yes.
Have we got it?
Not yet. Give it a second.
Can you click it again?
Can you click it again, Simi?
Where am I clicking?
At the bottom where you just clicked. Start presentation.
Loading.
Just make sure it's in the main screen.
Oh, no. Sorry about this. I'm going to do stop sharing and start again.
Okay, maybe try one last time.
Please see. Okay, we got it now.
It's okay, Simi. So just make sure that you advance the slides. It's not going into presentation mode.
Okay. So if I do that,
Yes.
is that showing?
Yes, it is showing.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that, everyone. If you missed the first slides, these are the bodies that I was referring to. And then over here, the images of the global travel. In the middle, I was saying that was tsunami. And then we had several terrorist attacks around the world, including, for example, the on the top left-hand corner, the train bombing in Madrid. More recently, the Paris attacks in 2015. But a biggie was the Iceland ash cloud. Europe skies cleared as all the flights were grounded when this volcano in Iceland erupted. And the volcano was not a problem on its own. It was the huge ash cloud that lifted and traveled across Europe. And flights were grounded for 6 days. 95,000 flights were grounded. And millions of travelers were affected, either those stuck inside Europe or anyone wanting to get back home or going to visit Europe. The 9/11 was a game changer. That was an unforgettable one. And in fact, for travel insurance providers worldwide, it changed travel insurance, the awareness of travel insurance for the global, for the consumer forever. America reported that after 9/11, the interest in travel insurance included 30%, and we probably experienced the same around the world, and certainly in South Africa, travel insurance became more relative. But what happened there is that security was stepped up instantly. If you traveled immediately after that, you remember that there were massive queues at the airport to board your flight, cancellations, people not connecting on time, missing flights, that kind of thing. And today we can't take our bottle of water through when we travel. But the most recent, that was also part of the security. The most recent event kind of reminds us we can't help compare to the thriller of 10 years ago. I remember trying to watch this movie, and after about 20 minutes, I gave up. It was just too stressful to watch. But if you saw it, or if you haven't, the film follows the spread of a virus transmitted when sick humans touch surfaces and leave the virus behind to catch. Then follows the frantic attempts by experts to identify and contain the spread, and then the chaos that follows and the scramble for the vaccine to stop the spread. Back home or globally, the coronavirus has not only caused millions of deaths, it has also created abrupt changes in the daily lives of people within a very short time. It has adversely affected the global economy, and it's caused widespread panic. Of all the affected industries during this pandemic, the tourism industry appears to have taken the hardest hit across the globe, impacting various related sectors such as hospitality, accommodation providers, travel agencies, tour operators, transport, airlines, trains, buses, and naturally travel insurers too. According to the World Travel and Tourism Council, the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to cost the industry $22 billion. To limit the spread of the virus, countries worldwide imposed travel restrictions to prevent entry into their own countries. And I think following the Iceland volcano, probably never before in our history has international travel been restricted to this degree. The majority of countries implemented border closures, and the huge decline led airlines to ground all majority of their fleets, resulting in many airlines running into financial difficulty. And if you look at close to home, we can name Air Mauritius and Air Namibia that we're familiar. In South Africa, our very first family meeting, the president announced the national state of disaster on the 15th of March. And at that time, 162 people had tested positive across the globe. And the president said he was imposing a travel ban on countries in Europe, including Italy and Spain and Germany, UK, the USA, and also China, obviously China. There were a couple of other countries, I think it was South Korea and somewhere in the Middle East. South Africans were advised to refrain from all forms of travel to those areas. South Africans returning from those high-risk areas were starting, at that time already, were subjected to testing and self-isolation or quarantine on their return. Non-essential travel was discouraged. There were chaotic scenes at South African international airports. Long queues, stressed out passengers, exhausted airline staff. We have quite a big incoming tourism industry in South Africa. All the visitors were at the airport, desperate to get out as flights were cancelled around the country. And shortly after that the announcement of the national state of disaster, on the 23rd of March was the announcement of lockdown and a total shutdown. And as a result, all around the world, many South Africans were stranded with no flights to get home, and many more in a panic about forthcoming trips. that they would not be able to take. And at the very same time, TRC registered its very, very first COVID claim. This was happening at the end of March. The chap was, it was a husband and wife. They were on a cruise, and they had gone to land, docked in Germany, and checked into a hotel for the duration of lockdown. And he became ill, and he tested positive for COVID. He was hospitalized and intubated. And right at the top, you can see there, 4 million Rand was TRC's formal introduction to our very, very first medical claim. Along the way, since then, we've had some other medical claims, and I've listed a few of the big ones for you. Last week, we broke a record because we had 3 COVID claims registered. Before last week, we were registering about 5 per month at an average cost of 95,000 Rand per medical claim. Globally, and certainly South African travel insurers were inundated with thousands of inquiries relating to potential claims, cancellations of policies, postponements of trips, and the related travel insurance policies. The anxiety levels of the global travel industry had reached an all-time high as millions of travelers around the world were stranded. During the next few months, the process of repatriating stranded travelers from around the world began with the cooperation of government and private charter airline companies. And that was because you couldn't get to, some people couldn't get to a flight. In fact, some people traveled across countries to get to a flight to come back home. So there were groups of people that were formed, published a list. Is anyone interested in getting back home? Let's charter a flight and get us back home. But DIRCO, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, led the efforts in bringing South Africans back home. Within a few days of lockdown being announced, they had received inquiries from thousands of travelers, and they prioritized travelers that were stuck at airports, students that had been kicked out of residence because their courses were finished, and of course the elderly. Soon after, South African Airways also published a list of international flights which would operate as part of the country's repatriation program. And South African Airways posted, formed a portal and asked interested parties to register on this portal. And these flights were solely for the purpose of repatriation and were approved by the South African government to assist passengers in returning home. Fast forward a few months, around September and October, we started to see travel opening up again, and we were now not just busy with thousands and thousands of claims, we were receiving inquiries about selling insurance as travelers were interested in travel again. And we learned, and we thought we were special, but it certainly is the global approach by travelers, is that while some of us want to sit tight and wait for this to pass, there were many that would travel anywhere that would have them. And I wanted to share with you how different our travel looks. So on the left-hand side, I've got our top 10 destinations in 2019, before all of this happened. Mauritius was number 1. Mauritius also instituted a very, very, very hard lockdown. In fact, they wouldn't let their travelers come home for a while. Their own citizens, there were about 3,000 stuck outside Mauritius. They got really, really nervous, very, very small island. They weren't taking any chances. And then by September, they began to ease their restrictions, and we got all excited and we thought, oh great, we've got some December travel to Mauritius. Travel to Mauritius is very important for the South African travel industry. 25% of our leisure travel is into Mauritius. And the Mauritian government said, okay, we're going to ease restrictions, but what they said was that you have to do your COVID test before you leave. Everyone has to do that nowadays. And then another test on day of arrival, and then another test on day 7, and another test of day 14. And if you get past that, you're allowed out and about to wander around the island. But the average duration of a regular booking to Mauritius for South Africans is between 9 and 15 days. Either people go for a week or for 2 weeks. Very few go for a little bit longer. So we haven't taken up that offer at all. But if you look at our top 10 for 2019, you can see in the top 10 we had UK, USA, Spain, Italy, and Germany, the five of the countries that our president announced that we didn't want visitors from, and we weren't to go there at right in the beginning. And so what's happening now? We've got Namibia right at the top at number 1, and you can see Maldives number 4. Those 2 countries are being used not only to visit because they'll have us, but also South Africans are going to quarantine in those countries because they are considered green listed countries. So some other industry events are that staycations have become popular because of the intermittent closed borders, because of lockdowns and spiking infections across the nations. We see a lot of people doing local is lekker, and we've seen that on our local travel insurance sales too. Large global events and large gatherings are a complete no. This market is known as the MICE market in the tourism industry, meaning meetings, incentives, conferences, and events, taken a complete nosedive and will remain dormant for quite some time. Group travel, groups have almost stopped because of the fear of spreading the infection, and this was usually enjoyed by school trips, religious tours, pilgrimage tours, or senior travelers enjoyed their retirement doing group tour around the world. That's kind of slowed down almost to a halt. The planet has introduced a traffic light system, and this system is used to categorize countries based on the COVID risk, the levels of the infections, how well the vaccination rollout is going, and whether there are any new coronavirus variants in the area. So this list is reviewed on a continuous basis and needs to be checked all the time because frankly it's ever changing. So if the country, and it's all about where you've been in the 10 days prior to your journey. So if you are traveling from a green listed country, all you need to do is get your COVID test and you will not need to quarantine when you get to the other side. If you're traveling from a country from an amber, that's on the amber list, well, then you're going to have to do a test before you leave and a test when you arrive. I think on day 2, you have to quarantine when you arrive in the country, and then another test on day out. On day 8. If, however, you are traveling from a red listed countries, and South Africa is red listed, well, you may be entirely excluded. And this means that you either have to go to the country and be moved to one of their quarantine facilities, which is not popular at all, or travel to a green listed destination where you will have to stay for 2 weeks and have another test on day 2 and day 8 and so on. But a lot of travelers are doing it. And the tricky thing is that transit visas are also important. So honestly, I would say if anyone's traveling now and they're doing it without the assistance of the travel agent, they're taking a terrible risk. We have a South African who was traveling to the USA to work. And so he decided to go and do his quarantine in Namibia. And he was flying to the USA via Frankfurt, but he happened to have the wrong transit visa. And from what I understand is that the transit visa that he had was the kind that you allowed out the airport and back in again. So when you got to Frankfurt, the authorities said, we're not letting you go. USA won't accept you with this transit visa. Now, he's just been in Namibia for 2 weeks at his own expense. And they said the only chance you have is to quarantine again in another green listed country. And the green listed countries that a lot of travelers are using to go to America or Mexico or Costa Rica. So he decided to go to Costa Rica and complete his quarantine. And a month later, he made it to the USA. Whilst the biggest risk when traveling remains the crippling effect of a large medical claim, and I showed you our 4 million rand claim, and really that hasn't been the worst we've been faced with in my career. Travelers are interested in cancelling a trip as a result of COVID or having to quarantine on a journey should they contract the virus, and any additional costs incurred. And what we've seen happening, to our delight and surprise, is a global gathering of support of this risk. To promote the return to travel, airlines, accommodation providers have relaxed their usually strict cancellation policies and introduced easy change options. Before COVID, airlines were very unsympathetic unless you either died yourself or there was a death in the immediate family. They just didn't want to know your story. You either lost all your money or you got 100 rand back. They really are strict, and that's for the cheap bottom of the range tickets. If you pay a little bit extra, you might get a change option. But many airlines, hotel groups, and even countries are offering some kind of COVID cover in exchange for a trip on their flight or a visit to their country. You can see there, those are resorts in close to the USA. The Americans like going to Hawaii. We haven't seen any of that happening from Mauritius yet, but Emirates is saying that they are providing free COVID insurance. So all of this actually supports what travel insurers are realistically able to provide in terms of protecting the risk during the journey. So as COVID vaccinations, the rollouts gather pace around the world, the debate has begun as to whether COVID vaccination should be made mandatory for travel or whether testing is the future. Currently, the testing that is happening is going for a COVID test, and you can only travel 72 hours before the trip, and then you'll be allowed to travel. But there's naturally a great deal of debate around the ethics of mandating the vaccine for travel, especially since the durability of the vaccines that have been developed so far still in question, and people remain divided as to whether to get the vaccine. Also, there are some groups that are prejudiced, and we might say we are prejudiced because currently, if those rules existed, only travelers over 60, or if you're a doctor or nurse, or this week if you're a teacher, you would be able to travel. So, that's still up in the air, and there's no consensus overall at all. Israel has launched a green passport scheme, which demonstrates that an individual has immunity. An Australian airline Qantas has announced that they'll start requiring the shots for all passengers on their flights, but still no consensus on this matter. This weekend, things changed so quickly. This weekend, I came across an article that Dubai, who's shut us out since January, was saying, okay, South Africans are allowed to visit. It was actually about South Africans, Nigerians, and Indians, and vaccinated South Africans, that vaccines that are approved by Dubai are allowed back into our country. They've been using the Pfizer vaccine, and I think it's called Sinopharm. We are not really familiar with that vaccine in their country. So there was no clarity on whether it was Johnson & Johnson. So SARTA was going to get in touch and check out what was going on. But they have withdrawn it. I actually saw an article this morning where they've come back and withdrawn it, and they're not letting us in for a little while. They've delayed when we arrive because, we haven't got enough of our population vaccine. The World Health Organization has said that they're in the early stages of exploring the concept of e-vaccination certification to get travel up again. But the World Travel and Tourism Council says no, for the time being, free movement is going to be dependent on testing, and they are promoting that there is an internationally recognized rapid and cost-effective testing gadget that is developed and dropped off at departures points around the world. And they believe that that would be the most effective way. So we might find in the future that every time we embark on an international journey, we're going to have to get pricked or tested or something like that. But for travel insurers, we battling the heightened travel risk landscape. Mandatory vaccination seems to be an appealing concept. The European Union is talking about making vaccines obligatory for travelers visiting their country. And in response, the multinational insurer in France, AXA, has plans to refuse cover for those who haven't taken the vaccine. They're saying, if countries are going to require people to have the vaccine to enter, we'll say, well, if you haven't been inoculated, you're not going to have cover. In the meantime, international organizations are coming together to launch a One Health high-level expert panel to improve the understanding of how these diseases that trigger pandemics emerge and spread. On this panel is the World Health Organization, food and agriculture specialists, animal health representatives, United Nations Environment Program, and they are going to be engaging and hopefully spot gaps and hopefully have an agreement on good practice. And hopefully in the future, we can avoid outbreaks like this one. So I'm going to take us out of the COVID cloud and take a giant leap into the future. These three chaps, these famous dudes, you all know them, they are space travel. Until recently, space travel has been limited to highly trained professionals working on the space missions, clever astronauts and that kind of thing. But a new kind of space adventure is emerging, and these guys are working on space travel for the future. And they believe they have thousands of potential travelers who wish to realize their dream of journeying into space. And it's very, very, very soon. It's Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, and SpaceX. The opportunities for this kind of travel are huge. A market analysis showed that there are about 2 million people in the world that would be able to indulge in this kind of travel. That's the size of the market. And 2 million is huge because that's the number of South African international tickets that we sell on an annual basis and make a living on. So to have access to 2 million rich and famous people who could go on one of these space adventures is the opportunities for this kind of travel are enormous, but so are the risks, meaning new specialist insurance services could develop. Besides the health and life, travel insurance could be part of this new sector, although in a completely different format for these extraterrestrial journeys. Other liabilities might find their way in. Like, for example, what about the rescue costs of a pod landing in the ocean to collect stranded passengers? Obviously, we can't send an air ambulance into space if someone's lost in space, and that needs to be, thrashed out and decided. But insurers are starting to think about what we'd need. We definitely need baggage cover and cancellation cover, repatriation, and that kind of thing. An accident also in space may be fatal, which would be the need, which would leave us the need for personal accident insurance. But traveling into space does affect the body, so we're still talking about the medical effects and what will happen after your journey has occurred. But new products and services and specialist brokers are all outcomes of what we can expect from this bold, new, exciting market. And this is an image of Richard Branson's shuttle or jet or whatever it is that we're going to call it. It was an image of a predicted design. I was having a look. It's very small and intimate, so it's not going to be a plane full of people. Those seats look like they're 1.5 meters apart, maybe even 2. So I don't think we'll be worried about COVID on one of these journeys. But if you're interested in doing one of these, obviously only the fittest are going to go. So if you have medical ailments, you're not going to qualify for going on these trips. But if you are interested, you've got to get to gym and keep fit, so you're up for it as soon as it is available. And then the other thing is, if you don't have $220,000 lying around like me, you've got to start saving now so that you can indulge in this kind of trip in the future. That's it from me, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that very engaging presentation, Simi. I'm sure we all can't wait for all the travel restrictions to be lifted. We will return to some level of normalcy and resume all of our travel plans. So thank you so much for that. All right, before we head on over to our next speaker now, just a reminder that the next InsureTalk event is taking place on the 24th of July. You can head on over to the chat function right now. The link has been posted. Go on over and register yourself early. All right, on to our next speaker now. It is Tony van Niekerk. He is, of course, the editor-in-chief of A Cover Magazine. He's going to be giving us his regular industry media update. Over to you, Tony.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity once again from CN&CO. It's great to be talking to everybody again on some sort of an update. This time I've decided to share a little bit with you something which is a bit of a bugbear for me, especially being in the media, and that is all about stereotyping. So I'm going to take you through a few things very, very quickly, as per usual, just to give you a little bit of an idea as to, from a media perspective, brand, etc., but also from a technology and a distribution perspective, some of the challenges and mistakes that we could potentially make. So I think I want to start off with just quickly highlighting to you a bit of a reminder as to what stereotyping is. It's a fixed or overgeneralized belief about a particular group or class of people. And I find this very much happens when we start talking about millennials, Generation X, Generation Z, and then of course the class that I fall into, the baby boomers. I especially find my kids very much putting me into a box when it comes to that. So if we look at just some of the stats, and there are so many stats available that one has to do quite a bit of research and that to make up your own mind and to fit it in with your own strategies, depending on where you are. But just out of interest to show you how we can easily make a mistake. When we look at web rooming and showrooming, when it comes to the behavior of the different generations when shopping or when browsing, etc., you will see very clearly that it doesn't differ that much. In other words, not significant enough to be able to get a company to focus only on one channel or only on one generational group. If we look at web rooming, for instance, baby boomers, which people think are not very online in terms of their shopping, etc., 40% of them said they sometimes web room, 22% often, and 9% always. Compare that with Generation X, and it is 40%, 29%, 12%. Not that much of a difference. Same with the millennials. And when we look at showrooming again, then you will also see the same thing, where 37%, 40%, and 39% says sometimes they would go to malls and actually look at the shops, and 11, 22, and 21 often. So not much of a difference when it comes to that. So if we just look at some of the generational online behavior that can be stereotyped and where one can make a mistake. Boomers shop online as frequently as millennials. Quite an interesting factor. Boomers more likely to buy from e-tailer than the younger generation. This comes through in a lot of the statistics that I've looked at. Generation Z relies on recommendations, which we all know because of the fact that they are a lot more at that age, in that age group, reliant on peer pressure, etc., etc. Men spend more online than women. Boomers most likely, boomers are most country loyal when buying. Very interesting. Boomers in general are most loyal, and that comes to brands as well. So this whole idea that the very young generation are more green focused, they're more likely to think about the carbon footprint, etc. When it comes to buying online and buying from international retailers where the carbon footprint obviously is high, then all of a sudden we see that the boomers are the best in that behavior. Not necessarily because they think that way, but the fact is that's how it translates. Millennials are least country loyal, which we thought would be the other way around. Smartphones are mostly used for researching products rather than to buy, which is also a very interesting factor. When we look at the primary reason you buy from a brand's website, which was another piece of research that was done, and again, shows you the dangers of stereotyping when it comes to looking at the different generations and thinking that they're going to behave so much differently. If we just look at the color coding here, you can see that the differences in percentages, etc., is not that much between the different generations. And therefore, it becomes a lot more important to rather try and look at how you approach these people and with what in terms of the different generations. That's a much more important factor than to think you're going to reach them on one channel or another. And this is where the omni-channel comes in so very importantly. And this goes again from a media perspective, because that's obviously where for the business that I do most of my research. But from an omni-channel perspective for media, as well as when we look at online buying behavior in general, the omni-channel is definitely the best way to go. However, it's not necessarily the only, because a company or a business could decide to focus or specialize in a specific channel. But in general, omni-channels, not startups, they're not online only. They have a presence on multiple channels. And the important thing is that they have huge capital to have an omnipresence. Now, one of the reasons why I decided to, out of this whole mountain of information that I could share, one of the reasons why I wanted to share this particular slide is because when it comes to technology and insurance, we often think that only the younger groups would be buying online. and we think that the older people would more likely want to see somebody face to face. But as I showed in the previous slides, that's not necessarily the case. It's more about the person's own behavior and their own preferences, but it can be the same across channels, across generations, etc. So at the end of the day, the secret sauce, basically, as I would like to term it, is seamlessness. In other words, you would need to make sure that whatever channel you choose, and again, the omni-channel probably to reach the most people, is that there needs to be a seamlessness. People expect seamlessness from one channel to the other. So in other words, if somebody research on mobile for a specific product, etc., and they compare, etc., the best way to do it is for them to be able to follow through on mobile if needed. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't have the same presence then if you're omni-channel on a website, for instance, where if they search on mobile, they must be able to follow through on website if they wanted to, and it must be an easy click through. What it basically just shows us is that we shouldn't be boxing people, because boxing people and stereotyping means that you are going to definitely exclude people from your processes and from your channels, your distribution, etc. The contradiction here is you box them at your peril, but you also treat them the same at your peril. The reason why I looked at the two differently is it's one thing to box them, it's a totally different thing to treat them. In other words, you could maybe categorize them in the same way, but treat them differently, or you could categorize them differently and treat them the same. And it's very important that one keeps that in mind when it comes to trying to reach different groups of people specifically. And one of the reasons also why, for me, doing this morning, this particular focus, is that this year in the InsureTech conference, which we're doing in collaboration with CN&CO, similar to last year, is we're going to be focusing on a lot of the myths and the stereotypes with regards to technology and insurance, with regards to online behavior, and with regards to the different channels for distribution and the different ways to approach people. It's going to be done on a round table basis. In other words, it's going to be a whole bunch of debates and discussions. It's not going to be just one person head and shoulder presentations. And so this year is going to be a very interesting discussion. So that's my talk for this morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to share with you. And I look forward to doing this again sometime. Thanks to CN&CO and to the sponsors for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony, for that industry media update. Over to our next segment now, which is the entertainment. But before we do, just a reminder that the SAWUMA virtual conference is taking place on the 2nd of July. We have posted the registration link in the chat, so head on over to register and book your seat early. That is the SAWUMA virtual conference taking place on the 2nd of July. You can head on over to register right now. All right, so we're going to have a little bit of entertainment now from Keegan Martin. He is the Idols season 7 finalist. He's going to be giving us a bit of a performance, and then straight after him we're going to head on over to a short comfort break for 5 minutes. So stretch, get some coffee, get comfortable, and then come right back. We will be back after that comfort break. So without any further ado, it is over to you, Keegan Martin, with that performance.
Hi, InsureTalk. This is Keegan Martin here. I prepared a few songs for you guys, and I really hope you enjoy it. Let's go. What you do? Where you at? Oh, you got plans? Don't say that. I'm sipping wine in a robe. I look too good to be alone. My house clean, my pool warm, smooth like a newborn. We should be dancing, romancing in the east wing, in the west wing of this mansion. What's happening? I ain't playing no games. Every word that I say is coming straight from my heart. If you're trying to play in these arms, I'ma leave the door unless you like. If you smoke, I got the haze. And if you're hungry, girl, I got fillets. Baby, don't keep me waiting. So much love we could be making. We should be kissing, cuddling, rose petals in the bathtub. Girl, it's your feelings buzzing. I ain't playing your games. Every word that I say is coming straight from the heart. If you're trying to lay in these arms, I'ma leave the door open. I'ma leave the door open, girl. That you feel the way I feel when you want me like I want you tonight, baby. Tell me that you're coming through. La, 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 la. I need you, baby. I gotta see you, baby. I'ma leave the door open.
So that was one of my favorite songs. I really hope you enjoyed it. But this next song, I literally have to take off my shades because we're about to take it all the way. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. Let's go. So I prepared an acoustic set for you guys in this one song. Let's go.
Baby, I just don't get it. Do you enjoy being heard? I know you smell the perfume, the makeup on his shirt. You don't believe his stories. You think that they're all lies. Bad as you are, you stick around, and I just don't know why. If I was your man, baby, you never worry about what I do. I'll be coming home back to you every night, doing you right. You're the type of woman deserves good things. Fistful of diamonds, handful of rings. Baby, you're a star. I just wanna show you you are. You should let me love you. Let me be the one to give you everything you want and need. Baby, good love and protection. Make me your selection. Show me the way love's supposed to be. Baby, you should let me love you, love you, love you, love you. Listen. Your true beauty's description looks so good that it hurts. You're a dime plus 99, and it's a shame. Don't even know what you're worth. Everywhere you go, they stop and stare, 'cause you're bad in the Jones. From your head to your toes, out of control. Baby, you know, baby, you never worry about what I do. I'll be coming home back to you every night, doing you right. You're the type of woman deserves good things. Fistful of diamonds, handful of rings. Baby, you're the star. Yes, you are. Baby, you should let me love you. Let me be the one to give you everything you want and need. Baby, good love and protection. Make me your selection. Show me the way love's supposed to be. Baby, you should let me love you. Love you. You deserve better. Girl, you deserve better. You should be together. With me and you, it's last forever, girl. Hey, so can we make this thing ours? Let me love you. Let me love you. Yeah, love you. The one to give you everything you need. Make me your selection and show me the way love's supposed to be. Baby, you should let me love you.
Absolutely love that song. Absolutely love that song. So the reason I did that acoustic for you guys, because now we're about to take it old school. Now this song is my dad's personal favorite song that's about to come up. And the song speaks about heaven. Let's take it there. I feel like dancing, actually. I feel like I'm ready to dance, so I hope you guys are ready to dance. Let's take it there. Come on.
Woo! Hey, hey, yeah. Hey, hey, yeah. Let's go to heaven. Come on. So all you do is move side to side. Just like this. Come on, join me. Here we go. Here we go. Heaven must be missing angel. Yeah. Missing one angel child. 'Cause you're here with me right now. Yeah. Your love is heavenly, baby. Heavenly to me, baby. Here we go. Showers, yeah. Your love comes in showers, yeah. Every hour on the hour. I wanna feel your loving power, yeah. Showers, yes it does. Every hour on the hour. Let me feel the loving power, yeah. There's a rainbow over my shoulder. When you come, my confidence over. And I feel your holy love. If this is one night crying from above, hey. Missing one angel child. 'Cause you're here with me right now. Yes you are, yes you are. Hey.
So now I want to try this little dance, you guys. You guys ready for this? So we're just gonna move to the side. So here it goes. And you go the other way. And you go the other way. Simple, right? Woo! There's a rainbow over my shoulder. When you my confidence over. And I feel your heavenly love. With one man I hear crying from above. Hey, the love is heavenly, baby. Heavenly to me, baby. Here we go. Heaven, hey, heaven, heaven, heaven. Woo. Hey, hey. Yes, it is. Yes, you are.
are, yes you are. Woo! Missing one angel child. Yeah. Yes it is. Yes it is.
Woo! That is it for me, guys. Much love. Keegan Martin, we out.
And we are back. Hopefully you got your cup of coffee stretched and even danced a little bit during the entertainment segment. We're going to head on over to our next speaker now. He goes by the name of Alan Brody. He is the CEO and founder of SA Harvest. He's going to be sharing some insights today around food wastage and opportunity in SA. Without any further ado, it is over to you, Alan Brody.
Hi everybody, good morning. I'm Alan Brody. I'm CEO of SA Harvest, which is a food activist company, and I'll tell you more about that as we go through the presentation. But before I do, I'd like to acknowledge everybody that I'm speaking to, although I can't see you, but acknowledge the great work that you do. Many years ago, I started life when I got back from overseas, back to South Africa. I started life as a insurance broker, and I started at Liberty Life. And there was my manager who became one of the doyens of life insurance in South Africa, said to me, you know, start with your family. That's how you start out in this business, which I did. And many years later, now, I mean 40, 45 years later, those few policies that I sold, or the first few policies that I sold to my family and various members, I see the unbelievable benefit all these years later that they have had on these people. And often we forget that, you know, when we're out, like even the work that we do now, you're out, you go every day, you're doing the grind, and we forget that the impact that we have. So I really would like to acknowledge the impact that you guys have on so many people's lives, and I wish you all the best in it. So I'm going to now start my presentation today. We're going to talk about food waste and the dramatic, if not catastrophic effect that it has on the South African situation and lives in our country. So I'm just going to share my screen, and then I get here. Sorry about this, it seems to have disappeared, my presentation. Oh, well. Wow. Here we go. Okay. Sorry, I hope you can see that. Right. So what I want to do in today's presentation is quickly, the title really is food waste, and what are there any opportunities from that? So what I wanted to do really is go into the basics of food waste, because many of us...
Sorry, Alan. Alan, sorry to interrupt you. We can see your notes. So can you please go to display settings and swap at the top?
Yeah.
On the left-hand side, display settings.
There's nothing display settings here, sorry.
Right next to that, just go up on the right.
Well, I don't mind. Should I just do without the notes?
No, we can see your notes, so it's in the wrong format. It's so right up there. You are right next to it. Just scroll there up, and I'll go to the left.
Yeah.
Right next to that. Right next to on the right.
That's my mute button. What if I just end this? I don't need the notes really. Like that.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. These technical issues. Just to talk about the basics of food waste, because many of us don't really, when we think of wasting food, we think mainly of the home. And of course, as we see that food waste is quite simply food losses throughout the food chain. In other words, from farm to fork. You know, there's waste in the farm through all sorts of reasons, from overplanting, from wasted crop, damaged crop, and often from having to keep to certain specs that are demanded throughout the chain. Like carrots have to be perfect and perfectly yellow. And, you know, God forbid a carrot is slightly bent and not in exactly the same shape, it's actually rejected. And of course, these things are absolutely unnecessary, but they do help. Fact of the matter is that in South Africa, through this chain, 10 million tons of food goes to waste every year. Now, I'm going to come back to this, but when we think about it, and we'll see as we go down the presentation, how shocking, how catastrophic really this figure is. So obviously, the cost of food waste is an interesting thing, because one of the costs is hunger, as we'll see, we will see as we go down. But the physical costs of food waste are very interesting, and not everybody's really aware of this. So just in resources, the energy used in our country to grow good food that goes to waste would power Johannesburg for 16 weeks. Water used, which is 1.7 billion cubic meters, would fill about 600,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. From the environment point of view, 90% of food waste is disposed in landfills where it produces methane gas. Very few people understand or know this. Now, methane's impact on the environment is 26 times that of carbon dioxide. If landfills where 90% of food waste goes were a country, that country would be the third largest emitter of damaging gas after the US and China. Money. The cost of producing edible food that goes to waste in South Africa is close to 70 billion rand per annum. Now, it's interesting on this point that South Africa is a net exporter of food. And it's quite remarkable to me that if we used the 70 billion rand to feed the hungry, it would solve the whole problem. And so we'd be called a net importer of food. There are a lot of these anomalies in this space and in this industry that we have to deal with every day. Just to give you an idea of where waste actually occurs is an interesting thing in terms of our position in the economic world. So 50% of our waste comes from agriculture. And as I was talking about earlier, there's a whole host of reasons that causes this. And often this is not really avoidable, but this is the bottom line. 25% of it is in processing and packaging. Now, processing and packaging, there are similar reasons. Often the packaging is inadequate and food goes off. There's obviously the same spec that has to be met, and met by the retailers, who are the most powerful players in our food chain. And if they don't meet that exact spec, they have to be disposed of. In retail, 20% of it is in retail. And many of you know, of course, about one of the greatest causes in retail of food waste is the date system. So we have the Best Buy, we have the Sell By, and we have the use by, which is the expiry date. The interesting thing about this is that, and we all know it, I mean, who hasn't had the yogurt where it says used by a date and 6 weeks later it's standing perfectly fresh in our fridges and we're all eating from it safely. So the interesting thing is that the use by, the sell by date and the best by, they really are suggestions. And one could question as to why they even exist. Because what happens is if we go into a retail store and we see that it's sell by and that's the date and it's still a couple of days or, you know, even more to the use by date, we still don't buy it. So it is a generator of a lot of waste in our society. One of the issues I have is that it's the producers that set these dates. So there's a vested interest in a way that they have in setting these dates, because the more that people, the retailers have to throw away because of the dates or get rid of before the dates, the more the demand for new product. And so it's in their interest, the producers. And I have said before that that's something that we have to deal with. 5% of the household, you may be surprised at that, a small amount, but the fact is that in our society, which is fundamentally a developing country, third world economy, waste at the household is very rare, because the people, the massive majority of people who are going hungry and are struggling to get food don't waste a thing in their households. So like in developed countries, we'll see that waste is more. In US and Europe, for example, they waste 300 kilograms per person per year, while in developing countries like South Africa and in sub-Saharan Africa, it's 170 kilograms per person per year. So what is the effect of this? The effect is really what I've called the irreconcilable facts. As I've said, 10 million tons of food goes to waste in South Africa each year. And while 10 million tons of food goes to waste, 20 million South Africans go to sleep hungry every night. And a further 10 million run out of money sometime during the month in order to get food. So the bottom line is quite shocking. 30 million people, 50% of our population, is in some degree food vulnerable, from slightly food vulnerable to extremely food vulnerable. And I think that this is a statistic and a fact that many people really aren't aware of. We, and I assume that I'm talking to an audience that is part of middle-class South Africa, we really aren't in touch with this. And when it's brought home to us that this is what's happening out there in places that a lot of us don't even get to see, with people that we don't get to talk to because of the social split between the middle class and the working class and those who need it, is so great. Some enlightening numbers then. In our industry, we work more or less. It differs between certain players and certain interpretations, but the average is about 2.8 meals to a kilogram. So 10 million tons of food is 10 billion kilograms of, 10 million tons of food is 10 billion kilograms of food, which equals to, at 2.8, 28 billion meals. 20 million people is 60 million meals a day, or 22 billion meals per year. So we have a look at it. This is not a country where there's a lack of food. There's a surplus of food. It's just that the surplus is not getting to the people who need it. So what can we do about all of this? And what is the central opportunity? So the first thing, of course, that we can do about it is reduce waste. In terms of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 12.3, the idea or the mission is to help halve food waste by 2030. And yes, we can get involved in that in various ways. There's no doubt that there are ways to reduce food waste. It's a noble goal. But even, at 2030, which is a mere 9 years away, if we are successful in that, 10 million tons of wasted food in South Africa would be 5 million tons, which is 11 billion meals. So it's a noble goal. And yes, we would try, obviously, to be part, and we are part. We're part of the CGSA's move in South Africa, the Consumer Goods Council Goods of South Africa, of their initiative to be part of the reduction in waste program. But we are conscious of the fact that this is something that is a slow process and doesn't happen overnight. Our focus is to be part of the SDG 2 charter, which says that zero hunger, using the waste that will be around for years, is what we want in South Africa. So the greatest opportunity for us and what we're all about is to use the diminishing, hopefully, waste to feed hungry people. But the question is, will this end hunger? So I've said the bottom line is South Africa produces enough food to feed all its citizens. So why are so many going hungry? So now I want to get into what my company, organization SA Harvest, is doing to try and end hunger in this country. SA Harvest, to give you a tiny little bit of history, I founded in the beginning of 2019. I raised a bit of money and got all the legal stuff together. We're a sister company to Oz Harvest in Australia, which in that part of the world has become a giant in this industry and has now, in its 14 years of existence, rescued and delivered almost 200 million meals. And we work very closely with them and other people with whom we collaborate in the industry. But just to give you an idea of how we set about it. On the one leg, we have food rescue, and on the other leg, we have sustainable systemic solutions. And this is underpinned by a technology platform, which is extremely important in order to be able to be transparent, safe, to ensure that the technology helps us in delivering timeously safe and edible food. And of course, in the end of the day, buying more trucks is not really the solution. The solution is in technology. Getting that excess food to people requires the collaboration of a variety of players in industry, and the technology platform, by geolocating people, geolocating transporters, is how we do it. On the food rescue side, it's really quite simple. What we do is we rescue from the food chain, from farm through to manufacturers, through to retailers. We rescue the food that would have gone to waste, and we deliver it in refrigerated vehicles to beneficiaries and community-based organizations who feed people on a daily basis. A statistic that's interesting is that at lockdown, the generally accepted figure was that there were 13 million South Africans going to bed hungry every night. just a couple of months after lockdown, such was the influence and devastation really of this, was that the accepted figure became 19 to 20 million people. Now, one can imagine what that means. And at that time, we were lucky enough that people sort of woke up, because that's what happens. The 13 million people who were going to bed hungry every night before lockdown, well, it wasn't in our consciousnesses at all. But suddenly there was lockdown, there was COVID, and COVID woke people up. People suddenly thought, you know, this is terrible what's happening all over the world, and the negative impact of COVID, apart from everything else, woke people up to the society and what was happening in the society. But the fact of the matter is that 2 days before lockdown, there were 13 million people in South Africa going hungry every day. So the impetus of COVID was enormous, and we were able to really get going. I mean, since lockdown, which is what, 14 months ago, we started with one truck about 3 months before COVID, but since COVID, we expanded unbelievably, and we've now delivered just short of 6 million meals all over the country. We have branches in Cape Town, Durban, and here. And it's not just our company that was able to do that, or our organization. People in the industry were able to do the same, and it really woke people up. And unfortunately, even with the third wave, people have gone to sleep again. People we work with, companies who are our benefactors, it's just the nature of life, I suppose. And we'll very quickly get used to the fact, as we did with the 13 million, that now 19 million are going to sleep hungry every night. I want to talk quickly about the sustainable systemic solutions, because from me personally, this is my pet passion. In South Africa, if you go to the Constitution, Section 27 of the Bill of Rights of our Constitution states very clearly that every South African has the right to access enough food. Even the way that it's expressed, to me, is certainly not optimal. Every South African has the right to access enough nutritious food. I would add in nutritious, and I also would add in on a daily basis, because how do you define enough food? But the fact is, and if you take a government who's not fulfilling its constitutional obligation, and you took them to court, for example, and said, you know, you've got to fulfill this right, you'd have to prove that they had the resources available to fulfill this right. Certain rights, you know, it may be impossible. Sometimes enough water is impossible. You're in an area where it's just would cost too much. The facilities aren't there. The infrastructure is not there. It would take time to do so, and so much time that it would be impossible in the near future, and sometimes impossible, completely impossible. But in a country where 10 million tons of food, billions of meals goes to waste every year, I mean, it's a no-brainer. The resources are there. And so the number one fight is a constitutional one, to push the government in whatever way we can, and we do a lot of work in that way, to be part of their drive to fulfill the constitutional right of everybody to get food in South Africa. Now, I said earlier that food rescue, which is charity and a big, obviously, what we do on that operational level. The fact is that the aim of our organization, and we are very serious about that, is that we want to work ourselves out of that business, the charity business. Charity is a whole other thing. Within charity is a built-in indignity for people. When you come, if you any one of you wants to come with me and you see 1,500 children standing in a line, quietly, with their hands out to receive just a little bit of food, which will probably be that one meal that they have for the day, there is no dignity in that. And there's no dignity in charity, and we understand that. And we also understand that charity does not end hunger. Yes, it alleviates a massive, catastrophic crisis in this country of people going hungry every day. And the fact is, without the NGO space, the space that me and the company is in, there would be people starving in the streets. The NGO space is massive in terms of avoiding that awful thought of people actually in their masses dying of hunger. So the NGO space is important, vital. And as I've said, the government is not, because the government is not doing its thing. But it doesn't end hunger. The way to end hunger is through sustainable systemic solutions, like intervention by the government in many areas that they could in terms of using wasted food, like creating access for poorer people to nutritious food at farm grade or as close to farm gate prices as possible. What happens in our food chain today is that the massive, powerful retailers who sell 96% of the food sold in South Africa are selling it at margins that are way beyond the farm. Comes out of the farm, you pay the transporter to take it to a manufacturer. From the manufacturer, you pay a transporter to take it to the DC, from the distribution center, back more transport into the retail shop, and then the retailer must put on its margin. And by the time it gets to you and me in the store, the consumer, the margin is huge. And the system that has changed over time, and there's a lot of history to that, but I haven't got time to go into it. But what it did was it took away the access from poorer people, from rural people, to nutritious, good food at farm gate prices. So that's really basically what I have to explain to you. There's so much more. And at any time, if you ever wanted to contact me to see what you could do or to understand more, please feel free. Anybody, feel free to do that. I just wanted to leave you, with this thought that to do something is not difficult. And I use this humbly. We started a business it was about 18 months ago now. And we started with one small truck in Cape Town, one driver, Doro Manisi, who today is the branch manager in Cape Town, and me. And 16 months later, we've delivered just on 6 million meals to hungry people. And we're making a great impact in terms of the systemic side that I've spoken to, working with farmers, working with government and quasi-government institutions. Don't feel that you can't do it. It looks like a big task, but just start with something small, and we can all do something of great value in our country. And so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for that inspirational presentation and for the amazing work that you are doing. It truly is commendable. I agree with you there with your last comment that we truly can be the change and the difference we want to see. We just need to start where we are. All right, we're going to head on over to our last speaker for the day now. She goes by the name of Handley Akrusa. She is the Santam Segment Solutions Agri Manager, and she's going to be talking to us about the role of insurance in the food security space. So without any further ado, it is over to you, Handley Akrusa.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of InsureTalk. When doing business in the agri segment, you have to look at the whole value chain. And I want to encourage you today to make agri part of your business and your portfolio. Just going to start sharing my presentation. Can everybody see I hope you can see my presentation. So thank you. And I want to challenge you today to really be creative and imagine how you see the future of insurance for the agri sector, including new products, new platforms, with all the new opportunities and technologies. I want to share with you an overview of the agricultural sector, the role of insurance in food security, the changing consumer needs, and how technology and trends are driving and shaping the future of farming. Agriculture is one of the key drivers of economic development in South Africa, and we have seen how drought and floods are threatening the agricultural sector and food security. And the questions that we need to ask ourselves at the moment are, what is the role of insurance in all of this? And what does the future of the sector look like in the face of the persistent spates of drought and uncertain economic conditions? And how can both government and the private sector support the growth and development of agriculture and guarantee its sustainable future? Agriculture contributed almost 3% to GDP in 2020. But if you include all the agricultural processing and industries that are linked to agriculture, this number is closer to 18%. We have seen that the industry grew by 13.1% in 2020, and it contributed 10% to SA's total export earnings. The sector employs approximately 885,000 people. And we see that maize production is critical, not only for direct human consumption, but also for animal feed, as Christo has also mentioned. For example, poultry consumption has grown significantly as consumption preferences have shifted. South Africa is the second largest economy in Africa. But did you know that only 12% of South African landmass is considered arable, with only 3% truly fertile? Only 1.5% of the land is under irrigation, producing 30% of crops. Climatic conditions play a pivotal role in South African performance in agriculture. South Africa is one of the regions in the world most sensitive to water scarcity. And it's very interesting to know that 20% of commercial farmers generate 80% of agricultural output value. Even President Ramaphosa, in his SONA speech in the beginning of the year, said that despite COVID in 2020, the agricultural sector performed remarkably well. South Africa became the world's second largest exporter of citrus, with strong export growth in wine, maize, nuts, fruits, and sugarcane. And the favorable weather conditions in 2020 and the beginning now of 2021 mean that agriculture is likely to grow in the new term. Now more than ever, there is opportunity for public-private partnerships in agriculture to promote transformation and ensure sustainable growth. we have seen accelerated land redistribution, and to date, government has redistributed over 5 million hectares of land, totaling around 5,500 farms to more than 300,000 beneficiaries. And this is in addition to the land restitution process, which has benefited over 2 million land claimants and resulted in the transfer of around 2.7 million hectares. I can confirm today also that Santam is pursuing programs to assist smallholder and emerging farmers with market access, to develop skills across the entire agricultural value chain, and increase the number of commercial black farmers. There are three key aspects when we refer to food security. The first one is the affordability, which is the ability of consumers to purchase food. The availability, the sufficiency of national food supply, and then the quality and safety of the food. And we need to discuss how can insurance support to ensure South Africa is safe when it comes to food security. Recent research done by MSSA identified the critical issues affecting farming operations as being the general production cost or the input cost, the political interference, climate change, labor and labor cost, theft, low producer prices, safety and security, the price uncertainty, the cost of electricity, repair and replacement costs, and then the availability of electricity, interest rates, and then also strikes, social responsibility, record keeping of activities. And this is all aspects where insurance can play a very important role. We've seen that the number of commercial farmers are declining, and currently, as Christo has stated, there are just over 40,000 commercial farmers. But the good news for me is that there's an increase in new agri-entrepreneurs and new niche farmers that opens new markets and new business opportunities. I truly believe that it is insurance that makes the world go around. It promotes financial stability and economic growth. It further contributes to the social protection of citizens by enhancing financial security. And there is a direct link between insurance development and economic growth. Insurance and agriculture have in common that both are responsible for sustainability, and both is an investment in the future. The future success of the Santam Agri offering will be in a combined offering of the asset insurance, crop insurance, and the structured insurance solutions, combined with the farmer's own risk management solutions and technologies. Now, our specialist solutions, ranging from pivot irrigation systems to livestock, and our specialist products have been designed to suit the agri segment needs. We've seen that the changing trends in consumers impact development in the industry. Consumers want to know where their food comes from. Traceability is key. They are willing to pay for quality and convenience. And there's a big focus on health, and they want to buy food online. The way that food is ordered and delivered also impact how food is bought. With COVID, we've seen an increase in online shopping and the demand for ready to eat and to eat. According to an article that was published by Trimble in January 2021, the technologies impacting agriculture is listed on the slide, and I just want to highlight a few. The first one is the increased use of aerial imaging. More farmers will turn to aerial imaging to better manage their crops in future. When this data is coupled with precision ag technology, farmers will be able to manage their crops more accurately, allowing for increased production and profits. We see that water management is key. And due to the concerns about climate change, more consumers are pushing farmers to adopt conservation agricultural practices. And this refers to practices that increase soil quality, such as reduced tillage and the use of cover crops. There's also new technologies for more precise nitrogen applications and digital information sharing. And then the implementation of localized weather data with in-field sensors that allow for instantaneous and accurate observations of wind and rainfall and temperature. When this is combined with data management software, this accurate weather data will help inform spraying, irrigating, and harvest windows. Accurate yield predictions are made possible with new technologies that allow farmers to quickly and accurately predict yields before crops are harvested. With accurate yields, farmers will be able to find buyers for all their harvest, eliminating food waste by increasing profits. And then we see the investment in indoor farming, but field mapping will see the largest growth since field mapping allow for more accurate planting and spraying and harvesting. But even if you have all this information about your yield and your input cost and soil type and weather conditions, integrating this data is key to putting it to use. Data management software will allow farmers to leverage this data to inform their decision making. With that being said, we have to decide how will we link insurance solutions to the new technologies that is part of risk management, whether it's the buyer identification, the tracking and traceability devices. How can insurance support and give rise to new platforms and new business? In closing, I want to share with you some new and interesting trends. Have you heard of the Pink Chicken Project that wants to alter the chicken's DNA in order to send a message about our health to our environment, to future generations? Or what about bus buildings that by placing insect farms throughout the city, bus building lab farms for insects in Stockholm are rising with the goal of making it self-sufficient in protein and a solution to find an alternative to meat production? Or what about the latest fashion, eating ugly fruit and veggies, opening a new market for fresh fruit, but ugly fruit and vegetables? There's now a cryptocurrency based on bananas. Banana coin is a real-life cryptocurrency in use today. Cows recently boarded the world's first floating farm in the port of Rotterdam in Netherlands. And this project was the latest in an urban trend focusing on sustainable food production and bringing urban dwellers face to face with the origin of their food. Seeding the Desert is a South African invention that allowed drones to plant hundreds of trees in minutes. Have you heard of a ganjapreneur, an entrepreneur in the business of selling marijuana in regions where it has been legalized? All this opened the opportunity for new ways of looking at insurance and new products. Also focusing and investing in models that will prevent and predict risk rather than just reimbursing and replacing after a loss. Wendell Berry said that if you eat, you are involved in agriculture. And I hope that you will continue to explore the opportunities and make agriculture part of your future success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hanley, for that presentation, which does, however, bring us to the end of our session today. It has been an engaging one. We do hope that you have enjoyed it. Once again, let us thank our sponsors who have made this event possible. A huge thank you to Santam, who was our headline sponsor today, as well as our event partners, which include CIB, the IISA, as well as Cover Magazine. And then a huge thank you to all of our speakers for availing yourself today and sharing your insights. We enjoyed it thoroughly. And then last but certainly not least, thank you to all of you, our attendees, for your continued support of InsureTalk. I'm told that we had over 1,300 attendees online today, which is truly testament to the fact that we continue to grow. So huge thank you. We cannot thank you enough. And then a reminder once again for InsureTalk13. It will be taking place on the 22nd of July. The 22nd of July. We did post the link in the chat earlier on for you to register, but we will share it again. It will take place on the 22nd of July, so do head on over and register. All right, it would truly be an injustice if I did not share my closing quote, so here it is for today. It is clear that agriculture done right is the best means the world has today to simultaneously tackle food security, poverty and environmental degradation. That is by Irene Rosenfeld, and I think it truly captures the theme today. From myself, Nontutsuro and the CN&CO events team, have a good afternoon further. See you next time and stay safe.